began, when we conceived this format, we were thinking that it would be best if there were no moderator even, no hosts, just to let the two of them, these two guests and the next pair of guests, to talk to one another simply. For that very purpose, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask each one of them about the mountain they have climbed, the mountain they have climbed, up the hill as Arsine climbed it. I promised to say it in Turkish, but I forgot. I'm sorry. The mountain that Fethiye climbed with a lot of tourists. I'll introduce both of them in a way that you don't know. You know Arsine Khanjan. You know her as an actress. She has done a lot of political work with Atto Megoyan. But the Arsine Khanjan that you do not know is the one that is profoundly political and social. Deep down in her heart, she's always had an interest in political and social affairs. Has always been engaged. Fethiye Çetin was a political prisoner. Her aunt Dink's lawyer before her aunt was assassinated and after her aunt's assassination. The two of them are here wearing many hats, having climbed that mountain. Tell us about the mountain you've climbed, Fethiye, your life path. Please tell us. First of all, I'm very grateful to Civilitas and Anadolu Kültür for organizing this event, and I'm very grateful to Arsine as well. Indeed. I was born in one of the towns in the east of Turkey. My father died when I was very young, so I grew up with my grandparents. We were a Muslim family. My grandmother and grandfather were from Cermit, which is one of the villages near Diyarbakir. In the schools, they didn't tell us about our newest history, so we thought that the Turks were a nation with a very important, a very critical history. They just ran from victory to victory. They always had been accused, the Turks, but they always defeated their enemies. And that's what we learned in school. Then one day, my grandmother started to tell me a different story. And the story that I heard did not really fit the story that I had learned prior to it. Setting aside the fact that it was a very smooth and well-rounded story, I felt that there were many pages in that story to be ashamed of. And then I took a look around, and then I saw that the injustice, the shame, all the techniques that had been used are continuing to be used. And how? The Armenians, of which very few were remaining, were still living under oppression. And we did not feel that pressure. Around me, everything and everyone, everything around me fits very well within the story told by my grandmother, but it did not fit the story I read in the school textbooks. Then when I was admitted to law school, I was going to study and to become a lawyer, and I had to be a party in law, a lawyer, and I realized at the time that denying something is one of the greatest of sins. And you thus insult even more the people that you inflicted pain to in the past. Denial is one of the biggest sins, therefore. And then I started to believe that the real story was the one that I'd heard from my grandmother. And so I understood that we had to struggle for the interests of the Armenians and the other minorities in Turkey. And then I met with Hrant. And then Hrant was assassinated right next to us, and he was assassinated in the midst of it, and the trial then began, and I did my best for that trial. I could tell you that I spoke up in many places with the message being that my grandmother left a very big burden upon my shoulders before she passed away, and I can say it very frankly. And I want to say it very frankly, I do not want to leave the same burden upon the generations to come. I want to set that burden aside, and I want to relieve the future generation of that burden. And I'm trying at all costs to fight. And I have found a way. I'm trying, as many Armenians as I meet, I try to calm their conscience. And I think that achieving some change in society is crucial. And that's the purpose which brings me here today. I'm going to try to do all that takes and to continue to carry on with the struggle. On the one side, I feel Armenian. On the other, though, I feel that I am a bearer of all global identity. And whenever anyone suffers a nationalist insult, my heart is in pain, and I try to stand up for their interests. Thank you. Well, I'm always astonished. We can give her a round of applause now. I made a big mistake. And then, no, I want to switch to Arsene. I did not say that our partner in this project is Anatoliu Kultur from Istanbul, a representative of which Audzik is here with us today, and we will try together, of course, to continue this project, to make this a continuous dialogue. I'm sorry, I should have said that in the beginning. I'm always surprised when we sit down with Fethiye and talk. We had the same experience with Arsene in Berlin. It's no worry that we have no common language, but we understand each other in a way that it's impossible with others under a different set of circumstances. This type of mutual understanding would be inconceivable for people whose identity has been denied so many times, and people who understand that without the recognition of that identity we cannot move forward. It's that easy understanding I have not had with the others. Arsene has climbed her own mountains, her fair share of mountains, and she's going to tell us about that, and we go back to Fethiye after that.
I'll tell the story of my climbing the mountain in a very brief way, because I think today it is a very exciting day for me to greet Fethiye in my homeland. I know that Fethiye has been here before, but to have this public discussion in such a personal way is probably one of the first forums and opportunities of being able, as an Armenian and as a Turk, to be able to talk freely, openly about who we are and what our history is. So briefly, a couple of years ago, I finally realized one of my dreams with 9 other Armenian men, some of them are here I think today, to climb the mountain. And for us, all of us, I think when we say the mountain, it can only be Ararat. And this is nothing to say about Arakads, of course, but Ararat is in our consciousness as being the quintessential mountain. That experience was a pilgrimage and a symbolic travel voyage for me. And in a way it summed up years of dreaming about this notion of belonging to a culture, to an identity, and to a land, because Ararat, as I see it, as I know it, belongs to my Badmagan Hayastan, historic Armenia, and therefore in my consciousness it is my homeland. When Salpi Ghazarian suggested this forum to meet Fatih, as she would have known me, and many of you would have known my disposition about ever going to Turkey, I really had some hesitation because for the longest time I had refused to officially go to Turkey, acknowledging my visit as part of an experience to find out what the culture of today is. Because as far as I'm concerned, the country had represented a major denial disposition towards my own history, my own identity as an Armenian living in the diaspora. And I had always said to myself that I would go to Turkey only under one condition, and that's if people who are going to host me, they do start from the conversation of the genocide having been something established for both parties, and that from there on I would be willing to speak about something that I will freely express myself about. And I think through this particular endeavor and undertaking, I felt that this was the right time. But I do have to say also that I really was thrilled that this forum was not happening in just a free conversation about who I am and how I feel, but that it was somehow created in the context of Fatih Çetin's amazing, wonderful testimony as a Turk, but as a Turk who was ready to go back, to feel challenged, but at the same time absolutely ready to go back into her own history, which I had understood over my life that it was something that was denied to her, the same way the recognition of my history within Turkey from Turkish institutions was denied to me as an Armenian. So I thought that this was the heart of the conversation that we can have. How denial has been completely put in place by governmental state institutions in Turkey since 1915, and with different governments taking over the governance of this country, of this culture. But the denial has been something not only exercised towards us Armenians, or today present-day Kurds, or other minorities that live in Turkey today, but this denial has been also exercised over the majority of Turkish citizens, Turkey, period. It took me a long time to understand why Turks were always in kind of confusion and kind of upset when they would be proposed or they would be suggested this part of history. I could not understand as an Armenian why they wouldn't be that ill-disposed to address their history until such time where I learned that from the day you open your eyes in Turkey, you are told, as Fatih said, how amazing of a culture this was, how they had always won against the enemy, and going from victory to victory, and please bear with me if I may add, going from crime to crime, unfortunately, while this crime has been denied to all Turks equally. So that day I understood that even though denial is something that I as an Armenian and all of us as Armenians around the world, in Armenia, our homeland, in Artsakh, in the diaspora, we live as a reality, so do a majority of Turks. But today, thanks to the development of history and perhaps all kinds of political pressures that we have exercised from the diaspora, from Armenia, and so on, against this denial, there is a layer, a significant, very committed, very engaged layer of individuals who constitute, of course, present-day civil society of Turkey, who are ready not to start the conversation already at the point that we are ready to start, which is acknowledging what has happened to Turkey's Armenian minority between 1915 and 1918, and then later on also what has happened historically with the Republic of Turkey. Not only they are acknowledging that history, but they are understanding that this is a point of departure to change into internal dialogue with their own people, Turks in general, be it of minority background or be it of mainstream background, whatever that means, that it's the civil society that is taking on upon its shoulders this responsibility to push the matter to its own institutions, to its own government, so that that government does not feel that they are the bearer of history, that they are the ones who decide what Turks should think or know about. So this is a very important period for me, of course, in terms of my own history and our history, shared history. But I would like to ask to Çetiye, if I may, from the start, why do you think your Armenian grandmother, Iskui, if I may refer to her Christian name, her name born with, why Iskui felt the need, do you think, to talk to you, a second generation, not her daughters, but her grandchild? Why did she entrust you in specific this personal history of her life at the very end of her life? Why you?
I would like, first of all, to correct that. Iskui was my grandmother's mother. My grandmother's name was Haranush. My grandmother's name was Haranush, thus. It is indeed very important. I always thought about it. And what did I think? My grandmother remained silent until she was 70. Then she sat me down in front of her and started to tell me why she had to wait till she was 70. She could have at least told the truth inside the family. There was indeed a lot of government pressure, a lot of fear. We had a lot of fear. We were under a lot of fear. And I understand this in the people, fear of the government. But why not tell the story inside our family? Why was she not telling the story inside our family? Why whisper if you have to speak inside the family? Why did she wait till she was 70? I always wondered, Arsina. Trust me, I wondered. First of all, I don't think that it's only due to fear. I think there's a second sensation as well, which is that of shame. It was a great shame. This fear was, and not only that, felt by the perpetrators of sin. It was the fear also experienced by those who had remained silent, those who had eyewitnessed and not been able to utter a word, and that's what they were ashamed of. And they had not murdered, necessarily, but when they started robbing, looting the homes, they were in the looting. They took a small object from the looted houses. They were ashamed, too. I am ashamed, I can say, too, because on the one hand, I'm a descendant of the victim nation, but on the other, I'm a descendant of the nation that perpetrated all of this. You're right, I cannot tell it to the second generation. They actually had to tell their grandchildren, third generation actually. I think in terms of time, it's just, you know, it was a different time period perhaps in Turkey. It was a more appropriate period for talking in Turkey. Like my grandmother, those who started speaking when they were very old. Some started speaking the stories when they were in their deathbed. I think that for them it was a huge burden. Before they passed away, they wanted to drop that burden. I was one who heard this from her grandma, and my grandma was relieved. And I felt it. When she was telling me, as she was telling me, she calmed down. You know, I always said, when she was telling me, she was, in a way, cleaning up her skirt, you know, looking at one point and wiping her skirt, and then she calmed down. Then in the final days, she even started to tell me about the good memories from her childhood. We say to get rid of the burden, to get relief, the best way is to speak, the best way is to tell. I think that she had devised a number of methods to get rid of all of it. Like the women that were like her. She spoke with the women, her peers. They all went into a room, they closed the doors, and they spoke for hours. And the second method, perhaps, was in the final period of her life to tell it to her granddaughter. I think that those were the two main methods for her to obtain, to seek relief, to vent. And to the story to her heirs, as difficult as it was to me, I feel obliged to realize. I feel obligated to her for realizing what really happened. I feel obligated on the one hand to her. And then why did my grandma choose me? Well, of all the grandchildren she had, I was 24 or 25 at the time. I was an antagonist. I was a socialist. I was against everything that the government did. I was going to be a lawyer. And I always spoke up, and I said I will fight for the rights, for justice. I always said that. I would help justice, because up to that point I was witnessing a lot of injustice. She probably heard me at one point, and she chose me. And she said, this one will understand me. She spoke to me.
It took a while for you to finally put down in writing this history of your family. I would like you to tell us how you moved on from being entrusted with this history of your grandmother, and how you moved along to decide that this history is going to become something that you have to share with your people, all of your people. I don't mean particularly Armenians or the ones that you have been politically engaged and involved in developing, but I am assuming that from your earlier comment that you are talking about this notion of guilt, which of course you feel mainly as a Turk, and that you realize that this guilt is something that you cannot go on, which I also agree with. I have never understood how Turks can go on unconsciously to carry this guilt, but you took this in your hands as an initiative. But I would like you to explain to us how you moved on from having this in your mind and your heart into making it a public testimony of your experience.
Indeed. I always wanted to share with the public. From day one, I shared with my close friends. It was a short story, but I wanted to tell it to a larger audience too. I had a number of reasons, not just one. Here's what I want to tell you, to make it perhaps easier to understand. When my nephews invited me to the U.S., it was very hard to find them because they were my grandmother's relatives. When I was laying roses on the tomb of my grandmother's parents, I kneeled and I said in Turkish, "Whoever inflicted this pain upon you, whoever caused your family to split, on behalf of all of them, I apologize to you, and I beg your apology." And my aunts, when we went back home, my aunts said, "What were you asking?" And I told them what I was asking. But they were taken sad. They told me that I was not guilty as a third generation. But no, I thought I was guilty. I was at fault. Because I had not directly taken part in the massacres and all of that, but I was continuing the denial policy. I was remaining silent too. And so that was what made me guilty. I was guilty of remaining silent and for carrying on with this policy. So I decided to write a book and to speak up for everyone. And I suggested to my writer friends to write. I said, I'm not a writer, I cannot write. No one paid any attention to me, no one took me seriously. And then some of my friends said, you have to write that book. And I was scared. I was very afraid that I would not write a good book. What if I didn't write a good book? It was very important to me, as it's really touched my heart, a story that touched my heart. I wanted the story to touch the hearts of the others, and it was very important for me for someone else to write it. But then I realized that nobody else wanted to write it, so I decided to write it myself. When I was writing, as I was writing, I was crying. On the one hand, I was crying, on the other, I was writing. I was writing as I was crying. The writing process was like a therapy for me. I was getting relief. And then I wrote it, I set it aside. For a long time, I could not read it. It's like you're running, marathon. And then you can't look back. That's how tired you are. And then one day, a politician made a speech and wrote his words out. And it was along the lines of the denial policy, and I could not remain silent. I sent my writings to the publishing house, and I'm very happy now. It's so great that I wrote it, because so many people have read this book in Turkey. And after this book, you can't imagine how many people started to tell me that their grandmothers had told them the same stories. Their grandfathers had told them the same stories. They started to write too. So many people started to conduct research into their own family stories. In 2007, when Hrant was assassinated, interest in 1915 escalated much further, and people started to read a lot more about 1915, and that's what everyone says. On the one hand, I speak a lot, I guess. As when Arsine was telling us about the mountain she climbed, I recently climbed another mountain, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce it. In the village of Elazığ-Bolu, Kahzer Hayatsk literally translates as a sweet look into English. Kahzer Hayatsk in Armenian. Sweet look it's next to the church. It's a mountain right off the church. It's at the foothills of that church where my grandmother lived until she was 9. And in that village, there are 2 churches. There's a monastery on the top, a very beautiful one with beautiful springs. They don't have the best history or the best fate. Stones all taken away, holes everywhere. People had been looking for jewelry. All the traces of history were being cleaned because the denialist policy goes on. People do not want to leave a trace. And unfortunately, the 2 exterior walls and 1 arch of the monastery only stand still. The sources too, there are a few arches, but the water has dried up. And I tried to restore the springs. And then when I saw it, I wanted to do something. But how were we to do the restoration? It was not going to be an ordinary renovation. It was going to be an event of remembrance for the Kurds, Armenians, and Turks all to participate in what they had done. They had destroyed it, and to try to fix their destruction. In 2009, in that village, we started renovating, repairing the springs. I stayed in that village for 4 months last year, and participants came from Armenia. 2 of the participants were actually outside today, and they're like my children. We live together, we work together, we lived in the same house. With a lot of young people, we shared meals, walked around the village, we cried and laughed together, and then eventually we rebuilt the springs. Let's see now, the water is flowing so beautifully. We have to restore the dried springs. We want it, and we managed to do it successfully in that village. People who had been expelled from that village, people who had been murdered in that village. We did this for their souls, for the souls of those who didn't manage to drink water from these springs, so that at least their grandchildren can come back and drink that water. We did not want to destroy the traces of history. We wanted to maintain, conserve, and talk about these traces of history. The water that now flows from these springs, I went there and I found my grandmother's home. And we planted trees, and every tree was given a name. But at the time of planting the trees, when I was digging the soil, every time we found stones, and these were the stones that had been taken out of the walls of the houses, the destroyed houses. And I remember the stones, they were perhaps the walls of the houses in which my grandmother had played as a child. Every time we hit a stone, it was like pain flowing out of the stone. But we continued digging, and we planted more trees, and we gave a name to each tree. Heranush, Horen, Iskui, Hovannes. Those who were there to work. We also named the trees after the young people. Armina, Lucineva, and Shushan who were there working with us. Dilek, Zainab were there. Every tree was named. The trees will get bigger. And these trees we will be able to sit in the shade of these trees and talk our stories, and children will play under these trees. And birds will sit on the branches. My grandmother always said those days should go and never come back, she said. That was the last mountain I climbed. It was this May or June. I went there and I thought, for the first time I should visit historic Armenia, Western Turkey. I have to find a way, a means. And I went to the opening of the springs, and I was most surprised by the fact that you, Fethi, had found a way. You actually reserved yourself the right to say that this is mine, this has to be repaired, and I will go back to where it began. You had reserved yourself that right. You had found a way to do all of it in a shared, joyful environment. I always thought if there's a way to go back, I can't conceive it, but you actually found a way to return.
I would like just to add on Salpi's comment, in as much as when you tell, this is the third time I'm hearing this story, and every time you are giving still new information for me to hear about the very experience and the experiment of returning. But I would like to add on this notion of returning, because as you do know, and you told me, you gave us an example of this aspect of being an Armenian in Turkey today, how treacherous it still is, because the word Armenian is used like a swear word. So if you say to someone you're an Armenian, it is a biggest insult. It's like saying you're a dog or you're whatever, you're unworthy, you're a kind of lowest base of the species of human being. So you made a return with this identity of an Armenian, because you went back to the village where your grandmother was born, and every gesture you took on in this village was with the soul of your Armenian history. How do you deal, therefore, with not only setting the example by doing very pertinent, pragmatic work, how do you deal with this absolute argument that I have heard so many times from Armenians and Turks often about the issue of fear? How do you not get scared, Fatiha Çetin, of doing these things in Turkey, knowing that you will be insulted, possibly, and also because doing those returns are such impossible concepts, at least for us in the diaspora, but I think to a lot of Armenians in Turkey, let alone all the Kurds who cannot claim that they are Kurdish in their own land. How do you deal with this concept of fear, which is often used as a logical obstacle for people not to go to the next step?
Of course, being afraid is a human sensation. It's actually a human sensation. But when you think that you're right, I'm right, I have the rights, I'm righteous, and I want to create something based on these small stories. If in the beginning I had only pursued a theoretical political cause, I would not have been as successful, you see. I told a human story, my grandmother's story. Another time I understood that everyone was on the offensive. I'm sure that they did not like me, but as I was telling my grandmother's story, no one could attack me directly because it could not be denied. If you're talking about a personal story, it's nothing to be denied. It's impossible to deny it. And maybe by studying all of this, they actually felt something too. The most backwards of them, I think the most backwards person in Turkey even, had heard this story and could not deny it. But when you say genocide, everyone rises and say, you have no right to insult my ancestors. My ancestors did not commit that sin. But then when I tell the story of my grandmother, they say, oh well, we heard something when we were children. I think that was the key aspect. They managed to use it as the starting point. No one could attack me because of that. And then we had meetings on this topic. We wrote new books. We visited villages. Of course, it was hard. There were gendarmes in the villages, not to put pressure on me, but they put pressure on the villagers that were helping us. They were intimidating the villagers. They were actually intimidating the villagers, but we were not afraid, and we continued. And today, my friends, I can share with you, we cannot build anything with fear. If you think that you're right, and if you want to struggle for your righteousness, you have to bear in mind the consequences. What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? My life would be put to an end, but if you're struggling for justice, and if you feel that it's your objective, you also feel that your body is not as important. What difference does it make? I might die after 10 years, I might die today. It really doesn't make a huge difference for me. I'm already living with this sin, with this burden. It's the same thing to me. So I should rather struggle. That's what I thought. But someone else said it, I would say it's easy to say, but a political prisoner says it. It's understandable.
While Arsine gathers her thoughts.
While Arsine gathers her thoughts. This is the third. Then I said it. I was going to say that, but then I didn't because it would be a shame. While Arsine gathers her emotion and her excitement, I want to say this is our third meeting with Arsine and Fethiye in Berlin, Istanbul, and here. And the three meetings are all very different. All three can be found in the internet, armeniaturkey.org. This third one will be posted too. The objective was to have a very active engagement, dialogue, trialogue with you, so that the people who are participants, all those who are around the world and want to participate in this discussion, will be able to participate. armeniaturkey.org is the site to visit, for which we give you a reminder once again.
Fethiye, when Hrant Dink, whom you knew very well, and with all your might you tried to walk along his Calcutta, if I may say. So when he died, 200,000 Turkish citizens walked during his funeral, all stating, "We are all Hrant Dink." I, as an Armenian, and this I'm speaking on my behalf, not necessarily all of my compatriots' behalf, but I thought that that was a very easy comment to shout that day, "We are all Hrant Dink." It was not good enough for me to say we are all Hrant Dink, because Hrant Dink paid with his life a defense that he was putting on behalf of all the minorities in Turkey and not just the Armenians. It took me a while, however, to realize that my unease about this comment that we are all Hrant Dink was starting to take a different meaning, and that is what I trusted when I accepted this invitation for a conversation, because I realized that what it means to say perhaps we are all Hrant Dink in Turkey when you are not an Armenian and you are not Hrant Dink, that you are going to take that responsibility to move further. And that's the moment when you are becoming a Hrant Dink, when you are taking Hrant Dink's mission into this further level. You certainly personally have carried this out, but I'm realizing now that in Turkey, even if this number is very small, there is a certain group of people, part of the civil society, who is also ready to take this mission further. Not only say, yes, we acknowledge the pain, yes, we acknowledge the loss, but they want to be changing the face of this history. So I would like to know, given the experience of your book where you revealed your Armenian identity, and I know in our conversations you were saying that since then there are many people who are coming forward. Certainly when we climbed Ararat, my friends will remember how many Kurdish guides came to us very happily volunteering the information that their grandmother, and it's interesting, they're always grandmothers, it seems to be, 99% of the time, that their grandmothers were Armenian. Now, I'm wondering if you believe that seeking this acknowledgement on behalf of individuals in Turkey, individuals who have no history of connection with the Armenian background or Kurdish background, but they are willing to work towards what Hrant Dink put into motion. And your work and some of your colleagues' work who are going back to their courage, to the identification of their history. Do you think that creating this awareness can ultimately create also a larger impetus and a larger influence on the policy of the government, the denial policy of the Turkish government, and a possibility for a change, not from a political perspective at first, but certainly for a political end through the civil society?
Like you emphasized, that there was no political objective in the very beginning. But after some time, I have faith that it will make an impact on politics. It will, coming back to my history, to my past, there were government institutions in the very beginning that were trying to keep all of this in darkness. But when we revealed the sources that I referred to, they came and got engaged. They represented the government. The village mayor was looking at it from the side, but at the opening he came and he made a speech at the opening. And he said that we must recognize our history. And he represented the government, the state. Other politicians were the same. The governor didn't come to the opening, but he came a day ago and congratulated us. Now, if you think about it, these are the political figures. These are the people that work for the government. They would know that this is the easy path for them. This is, for them, like trying, they, without assuming much risk, by just following the historical events and memories, they can gradually put up with all of this. And they can eventually accept everything. It's hard to accept everything all at once. It was all eventually settled, but I think that the path we opened makes it easier for them. I think that this will all have political implications. 10 years ago, we could not even dream about it. We're here in meetings like this. We open springs. Let me tell you something much more interesting. We got feedback from the different villages. They said, help us too. They went to the Ministry of Culture and said, we have similar springs. Let's restore them. When I went to a village for the first time, some girl approached me and said, my mother's mother was Armenian too. And the mother was standing there and baking lavash and hit the child and said, don't say it, it's a shame, she said, don't say it. But then some time passed, and after the opening, the majority of the participants started talking about their grandmothers, showed the church. They also explained the history in their language, in their own words. So we opened a way for them. We paved the way for them. And I'm assured that it will have political implications. We cannot change the government right now. That's true. But in society, any change is extremely important, because when you manage to influence people's conscience, and as a result of that you achieve change, it's extremely important. I can even tell you, when the government apologizes but the citizens do not feel the pain, it's not even such a big achievement. I would much rather appreciate the human beings apologizing on their behalf. And I'm not saying this because what I did was important. In addition to me, there are other people. There are other plans as well, and it's all very important to me.
And probably there will be more as well through your example. If I may, I know that we are approaching, or we are almost at the tail end of our discussion, but I would like to give you an example that struck me in Berlin. It was a very unexpected moment, and at first I didn't understand the meaning of it, and it's later on when I got back to my hotel, I thought, oh, this is what's happening. And as Fatih was explaining her interaction with her own people in the village and so on, when we did the talk in Berlin, there was a smaller group, but very intensely listening our discussion. At the end, there was a young man, very officially dressed in a suit and all that, who came to Fatih and Fatih's friends, Turkish friends perhaps from Berlin, and they got engaged in this very heated conversation, which I could not understand a word because I do not know Turkish. So I tried to find out what was going on. And they said, well, this gentleman is a representative of the Turkish embassy in Berlin. He has been here listening to what our discussion would be about, and he's trying to explain, if you can imagine that, to Fatih that this history is fraught with, wrongs and problems and so on. And this conversation is going on. For a second, I thought, hold on, I'm going to have to say something about this guy, because I have been trained throughout my entire public contact around this issue of the genocide, of our history, to meet at the end always Turkish officials who are trying to convince me that my history, the way I know it, is erroneous, and that, the Armenians did this to the Turks, and look at Azerbaijan, etc., 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 which have nothing to do with the heart of the matter, of course. And of course, also how ridiculous it is to convince me, an Armenian, towards that opinion. But when I got to the hotel, I thought, what was weird about this situation? And for the first time, I have to say, in my 30 years of work around this issue, it was the very first time where a Turk was not coming to talk to me, but the Turk was going to another Turk to settle the matter. And I thought, this is another starting point for all of us, Armenians, in this country, in the diaspora, wherever we are. This is an amazing development in Turkey, because I'll tell you something else as well, and I'll finish on this. From my observation point of view today, in 2012, Turkey's major historical problem is not only the denial of the Armenian genocide. Turkey's major historical and present-day problem today, it's democracy, absence of democracy for all its people in Turkey, from all minorities to all majorities in Turkey. The Armenian genocide has been for 100 years now an illustration of this problem. So today, I believe as an Armenian that if we understand the predicament of the society in Turkey who has been denied its own privileges and rights to know itself as a Turk what that means, beyond the official grandiose explanations. I think we are all working towards a similar aim and purpose, which is giving to this country the opportunity through its people to know how to make that history right for themselves to start and for us Armenians who are part of that history. I felt when I was in Turkey for the first time officially that maybe this is also the country of my ancestors. And I don't mean just as the historic land, but just the fact that my culture has lived under the Ottoman Empire for so many years. And so, in a way, I feel obligated that we have this conversation today in 2012 between Fethiye Çetin and myself. Thank you.
Indeed, it was the first time that it happened with me. There was an embassy official, and here he came and introduced himself. Normally they don't introduce themselves. He said two interesting things. He said that they did big things in recent years as a government. He said, you should see it too, we're doing good things. And he insisted that I wasn't seeing it. And that I should see it, he said. And the second thing he said was, let's not use that word genocide, let's not say genocide, he said. And then we had a big discussion over that. And Arsina said, and I just wanted to add a little bit. Thank you very much to everyone. I cannot conceive better closing remarks. I just want to thank the German Marshall Fund and to yourselves for participating, and I hope that you'll continue to contribute on the website. I really do hope. I don't think we'll have such a conversation again, but this pair is a rare one. But I'm sure that we will have many very interesting, very exciting talks and conversations for this process to continue for the benefit of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.